Hi guys, this is just a little video on the second A grade YouTube comparison example whereby I'm going to make Gennaro's text 1 yellow and make text 2, which is Epic Mealtime's lasagna, text 2. This is to just visually show when the student is speaking about text 1 and comparing it to text 2. I'm also going to go ahead and use the color code of magenta for difference and light blue for similarity. And this is based on the comparative language document that you should be using to write your, I just realized language is misspelled there, when it comes to writing your comparison. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that just above this as a nice little color code. You should refer to the first video where I talk in a little bit more depth and there's a few more comments, but let's go ahead and have a read of this one. So, classic arancini di riso, presented by Gennaro Contado, and fast food lasagna presented by Harley Mornstein are seemingly similar videos within the context of the contemporary YouTube platform. So that's a nice basic topic sentence which acts as an introduction because we have both the full names of the videos and the authors or the presenters, and we have it noting that we're talking about context. And contemporary means modern, so it's a nice reference to the historical context of YouTube being a somewhat modern video platform. More specifically, both videos are created by YouTubers in a culture of technology that either mock or follow the trend of online cooking classes. Now, this is really good because we know that the online cooking classes relates to both of them within the context that they both deal with food. However, we know that Text 1 is the genuine online cooking class, while the text 2, which is Epic Mealtime, is the mocking of the satirical how-to cooking class. So already there we're noting a nice little idea of difference, which I'll go ahead and highlight in magenta. We could go ahead and actually highlight that in light blue in retrospect, and that in blue. But let's get down to the nitty-gritty. With the exponential growth of YouTube, the platform has given rise to both parodic and tutorial styles of videos. Interestingly enough, I would already be saying in reflection of this A grade that it's still an A grade, but there's a bit of repetition here already, which could be considered to not be needed because we're saying the same thing. Of videos allowing the creator to interact with their target audience at a personal level, so that's a nice note specifically regarding the context of YouTube videos where there's a direct address or breaking the fourth wall, which very few mediums actually do. The specific style of Contado's tutorials, so you'll notice that the student has chosen to reference them by their last name after they have said their full name, so let's hope that that continues. But the specific style of Contado's tutorial facilitates for the nature of the cooking industry, providing the audience with convenient at-home access without the extensive time or costs associated with traditional cooking classes. So that's a great example of context for text 1 because it's talking about the historical aspect of cooking classes where previous to YouTube they would have to be in person, they would actually cost money, and whether or not you continued with them would be questionable. So there's a no risk, I guess, in terms of watching cooking classes. Now, the word however, we note means difference. So if we were to go back to the comparing difference, we would have however here, followed by a nice little comma, which helps begin the comparison. So we already know that the comparison to text 1 is going to be different. So Morstein's comedic style of video rebels against the nature of mainstream media, providing the audience with non-conforming content to disregard social norms. It's a bit wordy. It could probably be a little bit more specific, just simply say that comedic style of video rebels against the nature of mainstream cooking shows, and actually state something whereby providing excessive or gratuitous images of meat or whatever you would think would be appropriate there, just to be a little bit more specific. But there's still that difference of the context of relating to the audience and the context of why the video exists. Due to the variety of available YouTube cooking tutorials, both presenters have created a point of difference to gain loyal subscribers and hence a source of income. That's fantastic. That's talking about the context of historical economic in terms of them both wanting to make money from it, but how they present their information or their approach to gaining subscribers is different. Similarity, so we know that's noting similarity. There it is. So we could have used likewise or equally. Please remember to vary the words that you use, but make sure that they actually fit with the flow of the sentence by simply reading it aloud. Both presenters use setting to establish values of specific subculture. Now this student is clearly going to lead into an example of how they both use their setting and discuss whether they're historical, social, culturally going to impact on how the video should be viewed, or rather its eventual purpose and audience. So I like the use of specific subculture. I like the established values, which we know is a key word when it comes to context and the questions asked. Let's go and have a look to see what Comparative sets his tutorial in a historical site, creating a sense of Italian culture, adding to the authenticity of his video. Now, when they said historical site, they could say set in a Italian villa, or specifically Comparative's Italian villa. It doesn't need to have said historical site. Be more specific. We then have a contrast, so we're going to have however. Once again, highlighting, so think about how the student could have varied that if it suits. Morrison's variety of fast food settings and his home kitchen create an environment which appeals to the rebellious nature of teenage subcultural group due to the identifiable settings. Little wordy. It would have been easier for them to say to make it relatable to fast food, because they have that opening montage or story of him going to various fast food outlets where he orders, the food that will be used for the lasagna. I would say the teenage subculture of fast food, or food that is cooked quickly and also in large quantities, which his video is somewhat mocking because it is cooked somewhat quickly but also in large varieties. But nevertheless, there's a nice contrast there. Furthermore, so this is a nice comparative language word that is used to add further evidence. If you're having trouble beginning your next sentence, consider using these, because I get the sense of we're going to have a similarity. Furthermore, both presenters establish different levels of formality in their tone. So we know that they're going to talk about a difference, but this is technically an elaboration statement that is then going to lead into the comparison. So Comparative uses correct cooking terminology such as chop, grate, mix to establish a formal tone in order to provide a great amount of detail within the explanation method. So let's color that yellow. I'm going to go ahead and point out that this is clearly language in terms of the specific example, which the students and yourself need to adhere to. So that's why I've colored it green. If we remember the organization, we have the comparison of however. Morrisstein uses erroneous cooking terminology such as ground beef penetration, meat poop, and tomato sauce to create an informal tone, providing minimal explanation of the method to the audience. Now, there's some great examples. I would be, in my feedback as a teacher, and dare I say it, fan of Epic Mealtime, be somewhat referencing how it still is, cooking language or language to instruct, but it is making a mockery of it, or rather relying upon that, that alpha male or male references to penetration, which is, in terms of sex, meat poop, which is, toilet humor, because we're not talking about meat in its proper sense, and tomato sauce just being a direct slang term on tomato sauce, to create an informal tone, providing minimal explanation of the method to the audience. The different tones position the audience to understand the extent of professionalism and specificity in each text. That's a great summary of noting similarity, because it's about how we understand the context of the video based on the language used. While both presenters use diction to explore contemporary social issues, each take an alternative side. Well, there's a bit of difference there. So you can see before they mention their examples, they do give a bit of context as to how they're similar / going to be different. Comparative expresses the importance of general health, home cooking and nutritious eating through the creation of the wholesome meal Arantina di Riso, while stating why I'm cooking so good, to imply the delicious taste healthy cooking has. I would instinctively be suggesting to the student to use the why I'm cooking so good, not the title, as an example, although some of your titles might actually allude to, I guess, the context. This doesn't, it's just professional, but the language of Comparative, which we know has somewhat broken English but authentic Italian, would be good. And I would actually relate to how this relates to the skill or ease, but rather the actual Italian professionalism of him, Comparative, being a mentor to Jamie Oliver, which we've discussed beforehand. So it's just about actually considering which examples to use. Regardless, the student then draws a direct comparison. However, Morestein shows a lack of desire in promoting a healthy lifestyle by stating 15 Big Macs, 15 Baconators, 15 teen burgers, no veggies, in conjunction with an ornate calorie count to mock calorie counters and therefore nutritious eating. Great example because of the language that is used. So I'm going to color that green. Sorry about it being green on green, but there's a nice embedding of quotes. Remembering that part of your analysis is your ability to embed quotes fluently. So it's always better to quote directly and embed it rather than describe it, because it still shows your understanding, but not directly from the text. I like the use of then a use of form in terms of what appears on the screen. So instead of it being green, it would actually be a pink itself. Remembering that if we were to jump all over the place here, we have context, purpose, audience, but we're talking about techniques of language and then techniques of form. And this is where the student could try and make sure in their review how they might actually try and mention a little bit more form or a language and form at the same time in each of their examples. Ultimately, both presenters utilize a range of language features to establish a brand that conveys a specific message. True. No denying it. It's a nice little concluding message. If there was more discussion on form in however you say his name, Gennaro's, which to an extent there is, because there is setting, they could have referenced setting there, but that's a great concluding sentence. Let's move on to purpose. So we have both Cataldo and Morestein create videos of a similar genre, however with contrastingly different purposes. They're of the same genre, so we could agree with that. It's broad, it's to the point in the sense of we know that they're going to be talking about purpose, so it's not a bad topic sentence to open up with. So we know that there's going to be immediate difference in this statement. While Comparative produces a cooking video for educational purposes, so that's good, so just making sure, yep. Morestein presents a parodic cooking tutorial purely for entertainment. So there is a nice, what we would say, a comparative or rather a comparative sentence that addresses text 1 and text 2. In the past, I've really asked students to do this throughout the comparative, I guess, comparisons of stage 1 English. But as you can see, because I know that this is still new to some of you, and you might actually feel a little bit more confident in your writing if you go back and forth in a few more sentences, then you can do so. But if you're able to do this with examples, that's fantastic. Though both presenters use diction to educate the audience, the technique is used for seemingly alternative reasons. So there's a nice little elaboration. Comparative uses words then and next, allowing the viewer to follow a systematic process, which subsequently educates the audience on the procedures required to cook traditional Italian food. So it's essentially instructional language. I would actually ask them to also, in that example, maybe reference form as to how he uses his hands, or something along those lines that even furthers this point, because you could fit it in there and actually reduce some of this fancy wording of procedures required to cook traditional Italian food. However, so we know that there's going to be difference. Morestein uses the phrase rippin' of strips of that bacon-ish and tray by the tray all day to ultimately entertain the audience, alluding to his street credibility, as no explanation of the cooking process involved are provided. So that's a great contrast in terms of how it's no instruction, but then again they've used that slang and humor of what Morestein says, tray by tray all day, to entertain the audience of his street credibility. Likewise, both presenters, so if we use likewise, we know it's going to be noting similarity. Both presenters use YouTube annotation, so there's that great technical language of the specific terminology of the technique, which you could easily find in the OneNote under analyzing YouTube once you've answered the questions, but using the actual summaries of film and YouTube specific techniques and language along with the persuasive. Both presenters to increase the overall exposure of the respective channels. So this is where the student is being specific in terms of purpose, as to the purpose being for them to not only promote the video and subscribers, but the channel itself. Comparative user annotations to cooking tutorials, Aribita and Risotto Bianco to increase the amount of views and hence subscribers to the channel. So just referencing the titles there is good. I would actually suggest that they maybe talk about how they appear within the video to suggest a link between videos, just like the lasagna one that we watched, how he said if you don't know how to make the white sauce, look down here, and he did the little point to the bottom left-hand corner, which is quite endearing for someone such as Gennaro. We then have the however, and then Morrison used the annotations to cross-promote Epic Mealtime's social media accounts by directly taking the viewer to the respective Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter platforms, therefore promoting Epic Mealtime and brand. I like that as an example. I do know that they could shorten this by not necessarily saying using annotations, but directly reference various social media platforms. You don't need to mention all of them. You could say one or two. It's interesting that one of the things that I remember from the video is the fact that all the men are actually wearing shirts. They're wearing the shirts as they sit down to eat. So it's within the video promotion, not just telling you where to go. We do have that further information, so they're going to build on this. Morrison uses giveaways by buying a customer of McDonald's free apple pies while stating go watch Epic Mealtime in return for loyal subscribers, consequently selling a sense of worth. Pardon me, sorry. Consider how you don't, or rather you don't have the word count to always do this, so pick your best examples. You could easily shorten this and then actually address how he does it in the actual video itself, where Contado does it at the end, so it's also about how often they do it to push subscribers. But here we have that reference of Vance Parkad's hidden persuaders, which are really easy to sneak in. If you were to address one or two throughout the entire essay or comparisons, that would be great. But there would probably need to be a little bit more explanation here. Moreover, both creators manipulate camera shots and angles to provoke the audience into feeling a specific emotion. It's true, but just like if I was to ask you what sport do you play and you said I play one with a ball, I'd be asking which one with a ball. It's a great elaboration sentence, but it is limited, and that's using important word count to simply say, both use their visual form to promote or to gain more subscribers. To an extent, you could actually start reducing these elaborations and move straight into Contado using extreme close-up of the golden arancini balls, or cini, to make the audience crave Italian food, utilizing the psychological facet of Maslow's hierarchy of needs to gain subscribers. That's not bad. Simply what they're saying is he shows multiple close-up shots of the finished product or the food to entice, to show its authenticity. You cannot just reference Maslow's hierarchy of needs to gain subscribers without actually saying which aspect. Is it food? Is it pleasure? So be specific and just don't generalize, as this student has, with specific emotion and then just mentioning that. But we still have however, so we know that there's going to be another comparison. Morrison used an eye-level shot of Epic Mealtime cast to make the often alienated teenage audience feel included, appealing to the social aspect of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Better, because it's about the social aspect, but I would actually say probably try and define this a little bit more in terms of what do they mean by alienated teenage audience. That's a bit of a stereotype, because I know that you guys are teenagers, and whether you feel alienated or not, if so, come see me. But the idea of you're not watching YouTube because you're alone, it's suggesting, in terms of building upon, I guess, the trope of eating a meal together, even if it's an excessive giant lasagna or hamburger, so consider that. Subsequently, so there's a nice little connective that concludes, so don't forget that you have these drawing conclusion connectives to help with each of your concluding sentences. Subsequently, both presenters use a range of language and cinematic techniques to produce analogous videos through with a variety of different though with a different variety of purposes. Analogous means in terms of an analogy, which it does, but it also doesn't work here. So don't always right-click synonyms that word. Audience. So we're on the home stretch. Cantado and Morestein use a range of language and cinematic techniques to target specific audiences. Yep, it's there, it's direct, it's to the point. We might reflect on topic sentences or how to open these paragraphs once everyone's written them, just because I feel like within 15 words you could probably do a little bit more and be specific. Both presenters utilize non-diegetic sound in order to appeal to each respective target audience. So this is good. It's a nice little elaboration before they go into the difference. Cantado uses non-diegetic sound of a traditional Italian music to reinforce authenticity, appealing to those wanting to create Italian classic meal. So we know that we have that music in the background. Word count wise, you probably would need to say non-diegetic sound again, because we know what you're leading into. However, Morestein, so we're going to have a comparison of sound. Morestein uses non-diegetic sound of loud dramatic music to appeal to a male teenage subculture, creating emphasis of the rebellious nature of the video. True, but it probably could be a little bit more specific as to what this loud dramatic music is. If it's rock music, if it's rap, if it's hip hop, pardon me, they should have been a little bit more specific. Additionally, so there's a nice connective of building into the next example. Both presenters use specific types of language to target their particular audiences. Cantado uses inclusive language such as "come here, have a look, and look at that," with a warm tone to target people who have a general interest in food, as these phrases provide a sense of familiarity and reassurance and therefore encouragement. So let's make that yellow. Inclusive language is words that are meant to include or make the audience feel welcome, such as you, we. So we are going through this YouTube comparison together instead of you are going through this YouTube comparison together. And you can, once again, remember to reference all of these in the, not comparative language, but the language and visuals. Have a good look at these, because if you can sneak in inclusive, emotive, exaggeration, if they use a rhetorical question, if they use play on words, repetition, okay, anything to reference color, you are going to be able to take your analysis that one step further. On that note, if you're unsure, put it down, leave a comment, and I'll try and help you figure that one out. But we have a good example here. We then have contrast of however. Morestein uses the language of slang, so you could just say colloquial slang or language, or sorry, slang, and they reference this. So let's make that green, okay, and player, and nothing goes down. Furthermore, Cantado uses gender-neutral language such as lovely people to avoid gender stereotypes, which is true. I think it reinforces just his affection towards the audience, which would actually be one of Vance Packard's hidden persuaders, whereby if we feel like the presenter genuinely cares about us or even likes us or loves us, we're more likely to watch because we're a little bit flattered by it. So lovely people. Additionally, Cantado uses common ingredients such as eggs, breadcrumbs, and parsley to target middle-class parents, as these specific ingredients are inexpensive, allowing the golf ball snack size to be easily prepared for children. That's a real stretch. I feel like there'd be something else that he would say throughout his examples, such as it's a family meal, or when the family gather around, or look at the family, they're waiting. So easy to prepare, so quick, because in terms of audience, you're better off actually stating how well it'd be for those who are looking for a quick, easy meal, who are time poor, not necessarily because they want basic ingredients. But that's up to you and the examples you might find throughout your videos. We know that there's going to be a contrast because it's however uses ingredients such as bacon, Jack Daniels, and cheese to entice male teenage subcultures, as these ingredients would stereotypically be consumed by the target audience. It's true, I would say, be a little bit more specific as to how they're, I guess, unhealthy, how the element of alcohol being added to anything within cooking, especially Jack Daniels, that drinking culture. But it still works, and then we have a nice little concluding sentence. So hopefully I've cut this down to 20 minutes as well. If I've gone over time, I'm sorry, but there's a quick little run through of the second analysis for you to think about as you write your own comparisons that are due at the end of this week. Thank you.